having someone to turn your work into that you know is going to look at it with such great care, that you know is going to call you out if you tried to get away with something or something's not working on the page, there's a hole in your story or a hole in your argument. Just having somebody pay that close attention is an incredible gift to a writer. And I have come to believe that there's no better way to learn how to write than to have somebody coaching you.
Welcome to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser, a formerly repressed creative soul turned fiction writer, story editor, and Author Accelerator certified fiction book coach. At Write It Scared, we tell the truth about why writing a novel is so hard by acknowledging that most writers grapple with two stories: the one they want to put on the page to the best of their ability, and the often subconscious internal story that prevents them from doing it. This show is designed to help you identify and rewrite the internal narrative holding you back while you discover and write the story you want to tell and learn all the tools to help you do that successfully. Join me each week for a new episode where we'll talk about writing to deepen our understanding of the craft and of ourselves as writers. Writing a novel is an inside job that we do not do alone. Welcome to Write It Scared. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, writer. Welcome back to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey, and today is episode number 18. Are you curious to learn more about what working with a book coach is really like? Are you wondering how it works and how it could help you grow into a stronger writer? Is it like editing or is it different? How do book coaches communicate with their writers? What should you expect when you work with a book coach? What do they focus on? And how does that result in a finished book that works? Well, my next podcast guest and I answer all those questions. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Jennie Nash, who is the founder and CEO of Author Accelerator, a company who is on a mission to lead the emerging book coaching industry with rigorous training, high standards for certification, and ongoing support for coaches while they launch and build their business. Jennie's own clients have landed top agents, six-figure book deals, and spots on the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller lists. She is the author of 12 books in 3 genres, including her latest book, which is Blueprint for a Memoir, How to Write a Memoir for the Marketplace. So let's jump into the interview. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Jennie. It's just a pleasure to have you here. You're my mentor in so many ways. This podcast is dedicated to connecting writers with the voices and the messages that they need so that they can continue to grow and move forward on their journey. And I can think of no better way to do that than to talk about book coaching.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So would you please share with our listeners a bit more about your journey to becoming the CEO of Author Accelerator? What did that look like and what does the work entail?
Well, I was a writer who became a writing instructor at a traditional workshop-based program. And I became a book coach because I was frustrated with that process. You couldn't give writers the attention they really needed. They didn't get what they really wanted. What people really need, what writers really need and want is someone paying attention to their work, not talking about the theory of craft or giving them prompts, but like, how is my work? How is my creative process? What am I doing well? What can I do better? And I began book coaching to give them that, to give them support over time and to teach them what they needed to know about their writing. And I had a great deal of success as a book coach, and I also just loved it. And after a while, my business became too busy and I had to do something. So I thought about hiring other people to work with me. And in order to do that, I needed to come up with a training program to show them what I was doing and to show them how working with the writer over time is different than coming in and editing a finished manuscript. So I developed this training program that I thought was just going to be for me to get these people into my system and program. But it turned out that the training program became its own thing, took on a life of its own, and Author Accelerator was born. And we now have certified more than 220 coaches in fiction, nonfiction, and memoir all over the world. And the way I put it is that we help book coaches run better businesses so they can help writers write better books.
Oh, I love that. And I was the 100th certified coach.
I remember that.
All right.
We were just on pins and needles, like, who's it going to be?
Yeah. I mean, just, just kind of luck of the draw there, but it's so cool. 230 some coaches from all over the world in fiction, memoir, nonfiction. That's amazing.
We have a great number of coaches in Canada. We have coaches in Australia and New Zealand. We have a number in the United Kingdom. And I mean, just in the last few weeks, we've had people sign up from Denmark, South Africa, and Serbia. Like, what?
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know what that means is that look at all the new resources available for writers.
It's a really powerful way to do your best work. Writing is a very solitary thing, as you well know. And it's not lonely. It's solitary. Usually people love to sit in a room and write. They fight for that time and space in their life and they enjoy it. So having a book coach is not necessarily, it's not about, oh, I'm not alone anymore. You are alone when you're writing. You're in that room by yourself, trying to get the story out of your head and onto the page. But
yeah, and as a person who has worked with Author Accelerator certified book coaches and continues to do so, I can't agree more. I mean, it's the reason I became one because of
you like the experience
because of the experience of being coached and how much I learned and how much I grew. And you're right, the writing itself is solitary, but in that we get in our head all the time and get in our own way, and having a coach as a sounding board, as someone to, take what you've got and apply a fresh perspective to it, you'll walk away understanding so much that you could never have seen on your own.
It's really true. It's really true. It's powerful.
It is. And there's what you said before about, it's so different than being on the receiving end of editorial feedback from a developmental editor. That's very one and done. And sometimes you'll get examples, to be able to apply what they're trying to direct you to do. But there's no way to work through that in real time.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a big difference. And also, the tools and techniques that a writer may need while they're drafting are totally different than when they're revising.
So true. I always think about those TV shows that show creative processes like Project Runway or the Great British Baking Show, or these shows where there's a very tangible thing people are making. And you can see them doing the thing. Like, here they are, they're frosting the cake or they're sewing that seam, and the mentors come in and, what are you doing? Or don't you see this? Or, I love those shows. And I wish that writing, that you could show that kind of thing, because that's what's happening with a book coach, but you can't really show it. It's so deadly boring. It would make the worst TV, but that is the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's so true. And there are pieces of the process that it kind of reminds me of medicine, actually. When I was an intern, I would watch my preceptor do this intake, and inside of them, they would be going through this process, this differential process of what the issue could be. That's not something you can see. And I always thought, I'm never going to figure out how to compartmentalize and get to arrive at this conclusion like that. How do they do that? And so I think writing is a lot like that. As you go, you begin to internalize just the working pieces of it. And so, but it begins by breaking down the pieces and the mechanics of it. And then the more you do it, the better you get at incorporating it all together at the same time as you write.
The thing is that that story you just told about the intake on the medical side, a book coach can learn to read the writer as well. So it's not only about the writing. I'm often on a call with a writer and I can see in their body language, in their behavior, in their voice, in everything about them when they're getting sort of deflated or weighed down by something, and when they're like, no, that's it. That's the story I want to tell, or that's what I wanted that scene to be, or that's what I wanted you to feel in that moment. And so I'm often, especially at the part that you're talking about, where we're at the very beginning, we're trying to figure out, what is this book the writer wants to write? What is their intention? What do they see? What are they called to? What is their reason for doing that? And when we're playing around with those questions and those ideas, I can absolutely see it in the writer when they light up. And that's one of my favorite things, is to read the writer.
Me too. Me too. I had a writer who had a developmental edit, and they came to me and they were like, well, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to apply this. I don't even know if this is the right thing. And I remember asking, what is the direction in the story that you want to tell? And it wasn't the direction that the developmental edit was pointing them. And it took a little bit of digging into, well, what do you really want to say? And what's important to you? And what is the message here that you want to convey? And it wasn't about domestic strife, really. It was about something, or domestic abuse. It was about something completely different, something completely hopeful, which put that book in a whole different genre and category, right?
Right.
And the second that writer hit on that and was like, oh, I decide. I'm like, yes. You decide the direction of your creative work. And yeah, that moment when their face lights up and their body language just like, it's a huge sigh and a huge relief. And then it's off to the races too.
I know, it's so good. It's such fun work to help people bring their dreams to life. And it never ceases to amaze me how much fun it is and how satisfying it is when it's not even your own thing you're making. It's facilitating somebody else. And that inspiration piece is a huge part of being a book coach too. It's fun to help other people find their thing.
It is. Yeah. And embrace the belief that they have the ability and can learn everything that they need to learn to write a book that they're proud of.
Yeah. So true.
That's what I love. So tell us a little bit more specifically about how Author Accelerator helps writers.
Yes. So we've talked about how coaching usually happens over 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or sometimes even longer. And there's a regular check-in rhythm that happens where the coach is looking at the work and then speaking to the writer. So that's what we were talking about, where you can see. That's because it's usually virtual Zoom call where we're going over what the coach saw in the work. And what I always say is that the result is a manuscript that feels like it's 3x or 5x further along than it would have been if the writer didn't have that person by their side. So it's a very interactive process, and it happens over that long period of time.
And it's the writing itself gets tighter as the work goes forward. So the back end of the book is often a lot stronger.
Yes. Yeah. Then what writers get stuck in is when they're getting ready to pitch, and they'll say, oh, well, things get really good in chapter 8, or chapter 13 is where stuff really starts to come together and the book gets really good. It's like, okay, that's not going to fly. We need it to be great from the very beginning.
Yeah. And it's painful to let go of that work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I read your book, A Writer's Guide to Agony and Defeat.
Oh, wow. Not many people do. Oh, it's a terrible title, but I'm adamant that I'm not going to change.
It's a great book. I mean, there is a truth bomb on every single page. Really, any writer out there get it because it's not a comfortable read, but it is a reality read, right? And I don't know why was I going there? It was something to do with the idea. Oh, I think I just read that piece last night about your book's not starting in the right place, but you're going to spend 6 months trying to like massage the first 6 chapters,
Right.
because you don't want to let go of that work. It's like, no, do yourself a favor. And I think that what to fix was do yourself a favor, cut off the dead weight. This is what writers do.
Right.
So yeah, but it's a great book. Please.
Well, yeah.
It's called The Writer's Guide to Agony and Defeat, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes if that's fine with you.
Oh, that'd be amazing. No, I frequently get feedback that the title's a little grim, that maybe I want to write a title that's a little bit more hopeful, but I'm like, no, it's about, I think the subtitle is The 43 Worst Moments in the Writer's Life and How to Get Over Them. Like, that's not a happy thing.
Yeah, no, this is called Reality Check. This is what it is. Yeah, it's filled with joy, but it's also not.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you want to stay in it, you better figure out why you want to stay in it. So we talked about how book coaching works, how it helps writers. So if a writer is looking for a book coach, what are the things that they need to consider? What do they need to be thinking about first?
Well, book coaching is an apprentice business, meaning you learn how to do it by doing it. So I would look for someone who has coached other writers, who's actually done that work. It's one of the reasons why in our training program at Author Accelerator, we have our students doing practicums. They're actually working with clients because you have to, it's different than being an editor. And there are skills that go along with that. So I would look for somebody that has been coaching. And as with anything, the very best way to find someone is word of mouth. Find a writer that you know who has had a good experience and can recommend coaches. I think that's the very best way. And another place to start is at authoraccelerator.com/matchme. We have a searchable directory of our certified coaches. So you know that those people have been well vetted, and you can search on a lot of different criteria to find someone there. There's a lot to be careful of out there. There's all kinds of bad actors in every industry. And, so a huge part is trusting your gut, trying to get into a short conversation with that person on a discovery call or a small package where you can see how they work and what they're like and what their vibe is. Listening to a podcast like this is a great way to get to know a coach, to know, do I like this person? Do I like their vibe? Do I like their philosophy? So if somebody has a newsletter, to follow their newsletter or listen to them on a podcast or some sort of presentation, because vibe is a huge part of it. There's a lot of book coaches that can do good work, but you want somebody who gets what you're writing, who gets you, who works at the same kind of speed and energy. There's some very quiet, introverted writers who want somebody very gentle. And there's other people who I've just met with a writer this week who's like, she's got 5 months till her publisher's deadline. She's, stuck. She like wants the tough love, like bring the tough love, so it's really depends on where you are and what you're looking for, but to trust that instinct that you have and to find the person that just feel right after the criteria of, do they know what they're doing?
Yeah. It's a relationship. And, and in that there's a lot of trust in this relationship. And so take your time, definitely take your time. I would also add, make sure you're finding somebody that works in your genre.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. That understands like the genre conventions and obligations to help you so that you can, write the best book possible. If the intention is not just for self-expression, if the intention is actually for this book to be read by other people.
Right.
Okay. So What are some common problems that can occur when a writer and a book coach work together, and what is the best way to avoid them?
I think all of those can be summed up under the category of expectation. So making sure that the expectations of what that coach is going to do for you, what they're not going to do for you, what they're able to do for you. Some people think, well, a coach is going to get me an agent or get me a book deal or get me on a bestseller list. Those are not appropriate expectations. And so it's what the writer is expecting. It's what the coach is expecting from the writer. The coach is expecting the writer to meet their deadlines and to rise to the occasion of this work and to show up. And, so there's expectations on both sides. So the best way to avoid problems that come from those expectations is just to be talking about them all the time and talking about, how is this going? How is this working? How are you feeling? If you're, as the writer, you're expecting some sort of editing, a lot of writers don't understand the difference between a different kind of edit. So, there's copy edits, there's proofreading, there's developmental edits, there's sort of high-level review feedback. There's a lot of different kinds of editorial feedback that you can get on a piece of writing. And oftentimes writers are expecting a book coach to do one thing and then they don't get that and they're confused. So the way forward there is to say, well, gosh, I was expecting that you were going to comment on every line and fix every comma. And I mean, hopefully that gets ironed out before you get into the actual coaching deadlines. But, to say this is what I expected and this didn't happen, not to let that go on, because it may be that you're in the wrong process or you're working with the wrong person or it's the wrong thing. So talking about what you're expecting, what you want, what you hope for, what outcome you're seeking, and for the coach to be really clear about how they work and what they can and can't control and what they will and won't do and where the boundaries are, all those things. So like any good relationship, as you well said, it's constant communication.
Yeah. Constant communication, setting expectations up front, continuously talking about them, and doing check-ins.
Yeah.
How's this going?
Yeah.
How is this going? Yeah. And I think what you said before, jumping on a discovery call, getting people on a call and talking through the process, and sometimes even doing a sample edit. I offer samples for writers that come to me for revision, or even when they begin the book coaching process, I ask to see at least 5 pages of everybody's writing. So yeah, so there's a lot of ways to do it, but yeah, I think you nailed it, like setting up the expectations out the gate.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. So are there any myths about book coaching that you want to bust here?
Sure. I would say 2 come to mind, top of mind. One is people sometimes worry that a book coach is going to hijack their story in some way, either actually steal it and run off into the sunset, or somehow make their story something different than they want it to be. And a good book coach is 100% not going to do either of those things. First of all, nobody wants your story. Only you can write your story. You can take an idea, but you can't take the execution of that idea. I mean, that person would be such a bad actor. It's hard to even fathom that. And a good book coach is there to help you tell your best story, not to make it what they want it to be. So that's one myth. And then the other I would say is people sometimes think that the only reason to hire a book coach is for some payoff that's going to happen, some return on investment. And most of the time, the deep satisfaction that writers get from working with book coaches has nothing to do with that. It has to do with finding their voice, claiming their voice, coming into their power and authority as a writer. And when that experience happens, it's invaluable. So the myth that the reason you come to a book coach is because you're going to get your money back or you're going to make more money on the book that you produce is not usually what the outcome actually is about. you may get that. That may be a byproduct of doing the work, but the real power of doing the work is in that internal shift that writers experience.
Yeah, well said. So as a writer yourself, what is the best piece of writing advice you've ever received?
Oh gosh, there have been so many, but the one that I will share is the most recent one because it was hilarious. And it was from one of Author Accelerator's certified coaches who I hired to help me write the third in my blueprint for a book series. So blueprint for a book is a 14-step process that is a method of inquiry at the very start of a book project that a writer does to get their idea out of their head and onto the page. And I had written the fiction one and the nonfiction one, blueprint books, and I was embarking on the memoir one. And I hired Barbara Boyd to help me. And I told her at our first deadline, I didn't need to do the blueprint for my own work because I was writing a blueprint about the blueprint. I'd already done 2 books on this. I certainly didn't need to do a blueprint for this book. She said, oh, yes, you do. She made me follow my own process, which was extremely meta. I was doing a blueprint about the blueprint. And honestly, she saved that book from absolute despair. It was going in a bad direction. I had not done the work of who is my ideal reader? What is my point? I thought that I didn't have to. So I thought that was great advice. Follow my own process.
Fantastic. So, and I also wanted to say that I listened to your interview with Rachel Herron on her Unstuck
Oh,
series.
sure. Yeah.
That was so good and so refreshing, completely inspiring. We all struggle, and we all forget. We all forget like the pieces of the process that worked. That's a human thing, is to feel like we can skip over things.
Yeah.
Because we're in a hurry and we want to get there. So
I think we know. It's like, I know. Oh, yeah, do that hard work. I don't need to do that. This is going to be easy this time.
Right. Yeah. So having people around us to remind us, to reflect, and to call us out when it's not working is
I loved it. It was great.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what's the best book that you read recently?
I'm like the last person in the universe to read this book, but I read Dear Edward by Anne Napolitan. It's about a 12-year-old boy that survives a plane crash, and actually read it on a trip. So I was reading it on planes. I was on long plane rides, and which you might think would be a poor idea, but it was such a beautifully written book and so well structured and so hopeful, ultimately hopeful. I just really loved it. I loved the experience of reading it. I want to go back and break it down. And there's so many lessons to pull from it. I thought it was extraordinary.
Do you find that you're analyzing as you read, or do you get pulled into the story the first time?
I'm completely analyzing. I'm ruined for reading, actually. And so it's a rare book that can really pull me out and make me forget about real life. This one did most of the time. Really, that's part of the reason why I was so taken with it. I was just so in it. And that does not happen to me very often.
That is so true. I am ruined for reading also. I have to intentionally turn off that analytical piece of my brain at night when I read.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can't. But when I find that all of a sudden a chapter, 2 chapters, or 3 has just blown by, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
that's the book that I need to go back and pay attention to. Absolutely. So what is your wish for all the writers out there? What would you like to impart to them?
To take yourself seriously as a writer. This is not something that you can do halfway. You have to go all in. And when you go all in on it, everything gets better.
Oh, thank you, Jennie. And you want to share about anything that you're currently working on with our listeners?
Well, you alluded to the Rachel Herron interview was about my finishing the curriculum for our memoir certification course, which is actually launched. It's a year-long curriculum, thank goodness, because nobody will have caught up to me and found out that I didn't finish before I launched it, except if you listen to that podcast. But we do now have certification in fiction, nonfiction, and memoir, which I'm just absolutely thrilled about. And you can learn all about that if you're interested in becoming a book coach at bookcoaches.com/ABC. That's bookcoaches.com/ABC. I think that's the best place to learn. There's a series of free videos about book coaching on there. And I would love if anybody listening is inspired to do that, to check it out. And Stacey, you're such an inspiration, and how you've gone out there and built a whole new career and a whole new business and a whole new life. And it's so inspiring to me to watch what you and the other coaches are doing. I'm so thrilled for you. And I think you're just an amazing advertisement for book coaching.
Well, thank you, Jennie. And thank you so much for coming on the show today, for just your vulnerability, your honesty, and as always, your integrity and your willingness to just be somebody who stands up for what they believe. That's inspiring to me.
Thank you.
And I think it inspires many, many more people. So I will make sure to drop all the links into the show notes about book coaching and where to find out more about you and Author Accelerator.
Well, thank you for the good work you're doing and for inviting me on.
Thank you for listening to the Write It Scared podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. And please leave a review. Reviews help other writers like you find the voices and messages they need to hear to continue to write their stories. Let's lift each other up. Remember, you can be scared and still be unstoppable. I'll see you next week.